Hey, good evening, Galleon. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary. Ventured out by way of dog sled and sleigh from my house out by the hospital up to uptown. Now, of course, exaggerating or being a little facetious. It's funny, in winter, which has been mild so far, hit us all at once over the last 48 hours. And I just got a message a second ago. I guess the schools are shut down for a second day, so there's no great surprise there. So let's move on to something that is surprising, and that is a week ago when we sort of signed off and forecasted or talked about what would be the next night, Tuesday night's city council meeting. I would never have guessed, let's put it that way, that the council would have um, uh, spoken out pretty clearly about their desire not to do the engineering on utility improvements out at the proposed Freeze Center. And in fact, what the council did decide, and I think it's a good move, excellent move, and that is they quickly commissioned, a couple of them took the lead, commissioned a survey. I think as of this afternoon, somewhat shy of 400 folks have responded. And most of you will see that survey in your utility bills. And of course, that's post office dependent. But in any event, what I thought I would do tonight is talk a little bit about some of the conversation that's been out on some of the chat boards, not the right word, what are they, group sites. And there's been a lot of discussion, and some of it probably more informed than others, but I think all of it going to the heart that there are certain people who have very strongly held opinions about whether or not a Galleon should commit through the Freeze Foundation funds and the Port Authority. And if there's some questions, we can try to clarify who has which role, but all of it leading up to a request to secure funds and build a new rec center for the Galleon area, for the county, and I think in some people's eyes also could be successful as a quasi-commercial venture with travel sports tournaments. So we'll try to spend a little bit of time tonight peeling away some of the comments that have been made. If you will, if you've spent a lot of time looking at it, I wouldn't suggest spending too much time, but we spent some time here in the office trying to categorize the comments into 3 or 4 different topics, and I hope that I don't monologue a lot tonight and questions roll in, and Matt's here and he'll interrupt as questions flow in. But I think one of the overall questions that's asked is how will the project be funded? And I think the answer is that the proposal as made by the Port Authority to Council through the Council Development Committee partially funds the project that's in kind of final design, getting ready to proceed if the dollars can be put together. It's true there's $1.5 million or a little more than that has been raised, and people have questions, we can go into the sources. I'm pretty comfortable that those are real dollars. And then in addition to that, the request from the Port Authority board members to council is support of a $5 million bond issue, which seems to have been the subject of a few questions. I'll try to explain that if people want to go into, who's issuing the bond and how is the debt serviced. So that those two sources of funds raise most of, but not all of the money that would be required to build the project. Right now, as it gets in the final plan design, I think somewhere there's consensus around 8 point something million, 8.3, 4 or 5 million, something in that range, 8.5 million. Then of course the infrastructure would be on top of that. So at this point, what the port's asking out of the city is sort of a pledge, a guarantee that if and when they raise the rest of the funds, there'll be this pledge to use Freeze Foundation funds in what I describe as a kind of ingenious way to provide funding for the project, but doing it in a way that doesn't reduce the $11 million principal. So it's not smoke and mirrors, but it will require that the foundation board agree to accept a rate of return on this $5 million debt that would be less than they're likely to be able to earn in the market, in the stock market, basically. So the request is about $11 million. The idea would be to pledge $10 million of that through the Freeze Foundation. They would agree to buy these bonds that the port would issue. The city then would use its income off the foundation, its annual allocation, if you will, and use those dollars to guarantee the debt that the Port Authority would be issuing. So I'm sure there may be some questions about that. The downside of that maybe is twofold. One is that, like I said, half the foundation's assets would be tied up in a bond that would earn, the proposal is 3.5%. There's certainly some years the stock market, many years in the stock market, where you could probably earn more than 3.5%. So that's the core of how that money would be raised, where the $5 million would come from. Another key assumption, then we'll get to questions, is, well, what about the other $6 million roughly that's in the foundation currently that would not be committed to the bonds? That would be in the marketplace, and the goal, the projections, would be that would earn around 6%. While over a 2-decade period, there are going to be years when the stock market doesn't grow by 6%, but that is really one of the risks that's being taken, one of the estimates that's being used to project how and whether this will pay for itself. So on the capital side, how is this building going to get built? That's an overview of how it will work. How the operation will be funded, I think there's probably a little bit less, or I would even say quite a bit less detail put into those numbers. And I think that's why it's important, why the survey serves a good purpose, and while it's important to continue to push to refine the numbers to make sure we have a project that not only can you build, but there's enough projected revenue to operate it in a way that doesn't, as some people will say, stick the city with those stranded operating costs. So, what questions do you have, Matt?
Okay. Nothing new tonight. Do you want to get through some of the other topics that were raised?
Let me hit another one. I've got a short list here. Another topic, a strand, if you will, is how this project, as proposed, will likely or could likely affect other freeze projects. I think that's a legitimate concern. I think since the foundation's income was returned to the city, I think people quickly forget or didn't know that for 10 years these same income was dedicated to paying back a debt that the city incurred right at the beginning of financial emergency. Local bank helped capitalize the city and get us running again. And so over a 10-year period, that debt was paid back. When that was paid back, then the city began to receive those dollars. And without getting sidetracked on what we've done, I'll say with the SMA, there have been a number of really awesome projects that have been completed in the city. And I think while some people might not agree, I think most people who use the parks would say that they're in better shape and provide more fun for kids and people of all ages than in many years in the past. So it's important from my perspective, just talking from the mayor, from Tom O'Leary's perspective, to look carefully at this $175,000 or $180,000 a year. In 2021, 22, that will probably be sufficient to do, if you will, one project. But over the 20 years that we're talking about financing this project over, I think that 185 will crowd out other freeze projects and certainly change how we look at undertaking any large projects with freeze dollars. It seems not to have been much in the discussion, but the way this has been proposed and set up, there will be minimal impact that it would be expected for the schools, for the students who are designated as free scholars. So I think in the overall discussion, the free scholarships has been something that's important. This proposal does about all you could expect to maintain that income and allow for that as one of the sources for high school graduates, Galion high school graduates, earning some pretty substantial scholarships. So what'll be left over after the center is funded, the debt is served, will be a project a year and sustaining the scholarship fund. Want to make one more comment, if you will, about this, and then again see if there are any questions. Over a 20-year period, I think it's important in any kind of negotiation or discussion between the city and the Port Authority that a final agreement, if the city would be guaranteeing this debt, that there is a projected schedule that would cause the Port Authority to pay some of this debt. If you look at the numbers, it's about $350,000 a year that after the first couple of years of operation, that the Port Authority is going to have to manage and operate this so that they can begin to contribute to this debt service, and thereby allowing more money as time goes on to go back into the regular, if you will, regular freeze fund to build and continue this trajectory of improving the parks that we've had the few years. So I'm in no way interested in doing with that small of amount of freeze dollars over a 20-year period. But I think to get the project going, to allow the port to generate operating income, you're going to need to have the debt guaranteed at first by the city, but after 5 years or so, the port's going to have to be expected, at least in my view, is going to have to be expected to contribute to that debt service. So, I mean, I have this sense that people are either sitting at the edge of their chairs or turning off YouTube, but we'll go ahead and see what the interest level at this point and try to respond to some of the other questions.
Thanks, Mayor. I do have one question that came in so far.
Yeah.
This one came from Heath. When do you anticipate a vote on the Freeze Center, and when will the survey results be revealed?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's the survey results. I think the deadline, if you will be set by council. In fact, I know it'll be set by council. It's their survey. I think it's a pretty neat idea what they've come up with, and I think it's important to get both information back and take the temperature, if you will, of those people in the city. When will council make a decision? If my answer to that question, Heath, is as soon as they can get a good consensus and one that's not against the project. So I think a timeline, it's a little bit like this idea of how many times do you have to repeat something? Well, I think you have to repeat it enough times that people understand it, or that people are convinced this is good for the community. So that the time frame, heck, we may be sawing on this log throughout 21. My take on it is we need to have a broad consensus in the community before we move into something this significant. I don't know, you have another question? Because I'm gonna, no, not really? Yes or no?
Oh, I do have one
Go
that came
for it.
in from Jerusa. Do you know how many people have responded to the survey so far?
Yeah, I think it was about 360, close to 400. So I think, by comparison, Jerusa, shoot, 5 years ago, maybe it was a little longer, we conducted a park survey. And it was, I imagine Galleonites were a little less computer oriented. Almost everyone who's responded so far has responded over the internet. Handful of years ago when we did that parks needs assessment, it kind of determined what people thought we should do. It seems like it's not going to change. What we should do with freeze funds primarily. We developed an agenda. I think we had 800. No. Matt's shaking his head.
About 550.
Oh my God, here I am exaggerating again. So 550, that was, and we felt like we got enough data out of that. So I guess at the expense of, I think that's a good start, 370, 400. So we'll be, that's kind of what we're looking at. Back to Heath's question, council will decide when the trickling in of surveys is gone on long enough, and then they'll sort of summarize and decide what to do with the info.
Okay.
Is that did she have two halves of that question? Or just that?
No, that takes care of that question.
good.
Now I've
What
got
else?
a new one. This
Yeah.
one came from Josh. If the project fails, how does the fund get repaid?
Well, that's there's so many Joshes I know. I don't know if I know this Josh or not. How it fails, or what defines failure or success, may sound like a fuzzy topic or a way to address this, but I think it's real important, and that's why consensus is so critical. If the community is factioned out, I don't think it'll work, it'll be a big waste of time, and on one side, and then the other side is, it's the greatest thing ever, it will change Galleon, if we don't do it, our fate is sealed in a negative way. Until we have a chance for those points of view to reach a better consensus, I think that we're foolish to proceed. So, part of what I'm trying to do tonight is get a discussion going, express my support for the project if built properly and funded in a way that won't cause failure. But I think, back to Josh's question, I think it depends on how we define success or failure. I know that sounds like some sort of baloney philosophy from a community college philosophy class or something, but what I mean by that is, without a consensus, in some people's minds, no matter how successful it is, no matter how many hours of community time that local kids get to and local adults get to use the facility, because that's, to me, a real definition of it succeeding or failing. Or in other people's minds, how many tournaments are scheduled there. We need to have a consensus around what is successful. Because a lot of people will never be happy, okay? Well, it didn't sell out the hotel every weekend. Well, it can't be expected to do that. So I think one of the things over the next several weeks, and kind of back to Heath's question, when will a decision be made? I think the decision will be made when there's a consensus around what can be built and operated successfully. So, for me, if there's young people from the Crawford County, from Galleon specifically, but from the area that are out there 3, 4, 5 nights a week playing turf sports or playing basketball, volleyball, that's successful from my point of view. And if it's not the sensation among the travel sports circuit, so be it. I think we'll have a certain level of activity there, and I think over a few years we'll find out that that's where our equilibrium is, and that's more what I would consider successful and not a fail. For sure, I've said a lot. If the facility is set up and operated in a way where the expenses are not carefully watched, then yeah, it could be a failure, because I don't believe the community, I know city government can't, and I'm not sure how the Port Authority could continue to operate at a loss. But I think it really has a lot to do with how they organize and staff and go about operating it, balancing between the need for local sports for all ages, from foosball for kids to pickleball for not so young kids anymore, and then certainly enough of a walking area to meet the needs of people who like to walk for their recreation. So it really, to my way of thinking, the core has to be local recreation, local kids, local sports, adding to what the YMCA has, not substituting or taking away from. But that's successful. A failure would be nothing going on all week and a couple dozen tournaments a year. That really would not. It might break even, but I wouldn't consider that successful. So, long answer. Any more questions?
I do have a question about a completely separate topic.
All right, I want to talk about, hold on to that. I want to say one thing. I was talking to somebody whose opinion I've grown to respect, known him for a while now, mostly through being mayor, and we were talking a little bit about it, the center and the controversy around it. And he pointed out to me how important it is to have this consensus. The last big project that was undertaken by the community, in some respects, didn't have that consensus. And I'm talking about the school campus. I think overall there was a consensus demonstrated by the fact that people voted for it, a consensus around building the schools on the campus. But without picking at a scab, without opening a scar, I'd have to also say that the determination by board members, other administrators, not to listen to the public when it came to the fate of the now former school property, that lack of consensus is something that in some respects dogs that otherwise really awesome asset for the community. You know, and so I'm determined to play a small role in making sure that those opinions aren't, that they're allowed to be listened to and see if they can be incorporated. Without creating too big of a comparison here, we also, because there wasn't a consensus about how the community was going to get in and out of that school campus, the taxpayers spent $1 million putting in a road, which I think everyone concedes has really helped that facility. I'll stay on the schools for just one more second. Without Hasby Drive, I don't know how the schools could have done such a tremendous job of bringing people, 400 or 500 people, cars, through the school campus for their has gotten to be a regular food distribution. So a couple of things there. One, the food distribution is awesome. The community working with the schools have provided access to that campus. And I think we've all learned that if that big project had had a little bit more complete public input, maybe there wouldn't be some of the frustration that exists out there even now many years afterwards. So, all right, I'll crawl back off that limb. I think you can never err on the side. You can never err on the side of getting too much information from the public. So, all right, other question?
First, two more things about the Free Center
Yeah.
before we move on.
Yeah.
Mark said transportation for local kids due to the location of the Free Center is an important thing to consider.
Yeah, I would say that. I agree with that. And when the project was first envisioned in the first discussions, the first study, there were a few more county-wide entities. And the project was envisioned as truly being a supplement for all of the schools in the community in this dilemma that they've had where they've lost a gymnasium and younger kids have to have their organized practices, kind of on not the greatest nights of the week and certainly a lot later than you'd like elementary kids. So that's really where the project then was seen as something that could provide easy access for young people throughout the county. I still think that's true. Yeah, there is for sure a trade-off. It's a mile or two away, and we make kids walk a mile or so to get to school. When built, we're going to have to work on how to get folks there. But it's funny. You see it when people sign up for youth sports. They may not have paid their utility bill, but they sure make sure their kid gets access to recreation. So I'm not ripping on that. I'm just saying that's kind of how it is. So we'll be mindful of it, but something tells me that either the nagging kid or the mom and dad that want to get the kid out of the house and a little recreation, I think we can overcome that. But the main part of the answer is when it was first envisioned now 5 or 6 years ago, it was seen as and I still think it will be, when it's up and running, still be a county-wide asset, not just something that is Galleon owned, funded, and Galleon. Damn straight it's going to be have a good slice of Galleon activity, but it certainly provides some neat opportunities for Crestline and Crawford School District for sure. So, all right.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
Cindy wanted to know, is there a diagram of the inside of the building that people can see?
Yeah, there is absolutely. I don't know if we maybe not put that up. I'll hold this up and then we can zoom in on it. But I've got it sitting right here, and it keeps evolving a little bit and being refined. So yes, there is, and I think Cindy will get this up on our website. You can take a look at it. All right, I'm not gonna hold it up. It just covers up my otherwise old and grumpy face. So what else we got? And then we'll get to that other non-freeze question.
Okay, Mark also asked, with the price of steel up about 21% with no foreseeable change, how much will this add to the cost of the project?
Well, I on Friday, because I think there's a chance, I think we really need to push ourselves to figure out a way to build this project. I was checking with some architects, and they said in 22 is when they expect that crowding, availability of steel, and that crowding in the marketplace to happen. It's kind of funny. I don't think he was trying to stampede me into buy it this year because it'll be more expensive in the future. But I think that goes back, Mark, to the point I made in passing to begin with. We're still advocates for the project. If the city agrees to do the $5 million bond issue, better said, if the Freeze Foundation agrees to buy those bonds at something less than a market rate, we're still going to have to raise some more money. And so I think I spend some time looking at ways we might be able to reduce the cost, but I think as a practical matter, if the city would commit, then some of the things that people describe as salesmanship, certain advocates of the project just trying to sell it, you know, what they're trying to do is create a sense of how naming rights can happen and how you can get corporate sponsorship. And so, yeah, the advocates are selling it, but I am a firm believer that if the city, and when the city makes their commitment, that will open up some more funding and we'll be able to get to that $8.5 million number. Seems quite a bit away, but I think the issue Mark's raising about escalating costs, I think you're always going to face that. That's what the architects, when I say, well, can't we cut this back for an hour, this or that, they'll say, oh, it'll never be cheaper than to do it now. So somewhere between all of that lies, I think, an equation that we can work out. What else we got?
Okay, still a few more questions on the Freeze Center. Yeah.
Good.
Next one came from Loopy. Would they charge the local people to use the building?
Hey, you know, Loopy, we have this like 2 weeks in a row. We are absolutely in line. No. For this to work, you're going to have many hours during the day when local people are not charged. You know, Loop, I remember, my vision is, and you know, things have changed in about 60 years since we were kids, but is what the center was like when it started. Very much a community center. And although you can't recapture that, that is more my vision. And it's not a criticism of the YMCA. You go by there anytime, you see dozens of cars, so it certainly is a popular place. But this would be less fee-driven, and for local residents, it's something you need to have access to throughout the week, and not from 11:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. or something like that. It has to be good slots of time for Galleonites of all ages, and mostly. No, I don't want to charge anyone. Now, having said all of that, if you come out on a Saturday and there's a tournament, I imagine you'll feel like we had a vacuum cleaner attached to you, as you have to pay for parking and you get inside and there's other expenses. But no, just to use it through the week, my view of it, and I hope council would agree, this would not be driven by fees. And there's pressure every daggone year to raise rates at the swimming pool or to charge a fee at the splash park, and man, I'm just not into it. So you know, Loop, as long as I'm mayor, we'll never charge anyone at the Freeze Center. But I say that joking around. I think that's critical, that this isn't something that you have to belong to as a member to have access to. Nah, I don't want to do it if it's that way.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. A couple more questions here. Next one came from Josh. If the port has to come up with more money, why can't they raise enough to cut the city's cost?
Well, they might, you know, they might. The $5 million. It's kind of funny that we've been working. Some of us have been working on this for years, and without having some sort of crystal ball. A few years ago, in talking with Michael DePerna, who's the port hired as a financial advisor, just sort of looked at it in several different ways. And it's been my thought for a few years that $5 million is about the max that the Freeze Foundation can afford without liquidating it to, shrinking it in half or reducing its capacity to do other projects in the community. So, $5 million is about all that the foundation can afford. And I think one of the points that's real important is I don't have any intention, don't think council has any intention of committing tax dollars, as in property tax or income tax dollars, to the capital needed to build the project. So this is, 5 million is about all the Freeze Foundation. That's about as broad as its shoulders are. Josh, you're right. If they can raise more than that, I would sure hope that that would be more than the $2 million gap or whatever. I would hope that that would be go on the side of reducing the city side, but we aren't there yet. But I do think once the city commits, you'll see significant sponsorship money committed, and some of the corporate money that you hear from some folks. Well, why doesn't this employer or that employer put in some money? I think once the city makes a commitment, you'll see that have a greater chance of falling in place. What else you got?
Okay, next question tonight came from Jerusha. If the project is approved to move forward, is there an estimate for when construction would be completed?
Well, if you ask that of 2 or 3 Port Authority members, they would say that they'd like to get moving in 21. I think that becomes less and less likely. So 22, I think, is probably the soonest that this all could fall in place. And that comes from somebody who has been talking about this and thinking about it for 5 or 6 years. And so I'm getting impatient and somewhat frustrated. So if the question is, the next question is, why does it take so long? It has a lot to do with the construction season, the ordering of materials, the financing, and those things. So if we can get past this current discussion, debate stage, as we move into the middle of 21, COVID clarifies, we get going, I think 21, in my view, 21 is probably unlikely, and 22 is as early as one could expect it to start to happen.
Thanks, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
That's everything I had on the Freeze Center. I did have one question on a different topic. That one came from Brian. He asked what happened at First Federal Bank today. And I happen to know the answer. So, just really quickly, Brian, apparently there was a bank robbery at some point this morning, but I do not have any further detail.
Well, I don't know anything about that, Matt. So that's the news. That's our news guy, communications guy, confirming the unconfirmed story. So I don't know what went on. Hey, we got anything else?
I had something else just come in. Let me. This one came from Holly. My parents live on a dead-end street. They never get plowed or salted. Is there a way we can get the city to make sure they don't miss this area? They're almost in their 60s and shouldn't be doing it themselves.
Yeah, I have no sympathy for people in their 60s. No, I got it. We got to get us the address. We won't send it over. You can send that either to us tomorrow if you don't want to, or you can send it through there so they can see it. Folks can see it in the group chat.
That is all I have at this time.
Okay, I think we've been on for 40 minutes. I think next week, if the discussion goes on, I would suggest that we go through the survey, and between now and then, I think encourage people to get a look at it. You can find it at our website, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then in your utility bill, there'll be a survey for those people who like the hard copy, want to fill it out itself. And I think that's going to be a useful tool. I think that this is the likelihood of the project being completed and having the support of the community is increased the more information we get. I think that advocates and doubters both, we need to listen a little bit to the questions that come in, and we need to be responsive to them, because this is a major project. If executed well and with the support of the community, I think something we'll all be proud of. if it's something that's rushed through or certain points of view are muted, then those people in leadership roles over the next 10, 15 years will have to be saddled, if you will, with some of the discontent and the feeling in the community that people's opinions weren't valued. So, anyways, nice job, council. Last time I said something good about you, everybody abandoned. We got no votes, so I'm risking it. But I really thought it's a good idea. I think over the next couple of weeks, people respond. It'll reinforce in people's minds what a good idea it was to do this survey, and the community be better off if we draw the right lessons from it. So, grocery store I was talking with a family member today, and she wasn't aware that there is an opportunity for a grocery store. It's not a brand new freestanding. We're a community of 10,000 people, but I think a major reinvestment in an existing operation, which is the proposal out at the Save-A-Lot property, is real positive news, and we're going to try to flesh that out and make it happen in 21. But the investor in the project is somebody who's done a lot of good things for Galion, so that's real positive. Some night, but not tonight, we'll go into how the city's interest has been protected since day one and continues to be protected with reference to the sleep-in. Those utilities that we put in they're secured by the deed, and as that property goes through probably resale, maybe foreclosure and resale. I don't have a seat in that courtroom at this point. So what I think what you'll find is that there is a way for the city, and the city has done a good job trying to protect their interest. And we'll kind of go back through that. People who don't like the hotel continue to come back and try to tie this project we've talked about tonight back to the risky investment that was done in sleep-in, when in fact the investment in sleep-in wasn't risky. So it's secured, and nobody likes where it's at. Nobody expected COVID to devastate a few industries, like the church directories industry and like the hospitality industry. So we got to keep pushing on and hope that both of those industries recover for the benefit of Galion. So anyway, I'll go on and on. It's like I get paid by the minute or something. But I do appreciate the interest, and I really want people to take a look at that survey, and we can engage in some Q&A next week as people get a chance to look at it. And I think the survey starts a quest of getting information out, and appreciate your cooperation in it. So anyways, having said that, and probably too much more, I'll say stay safe, and those people with school-age kids, have fun tomorrow. They're in the house again, so good night.